Cyphers. We used to be called sorcerers, a rare breed of being that could wield mind-controlling powers. In reality, we could control electrical impulses, but we didn't come into our own until the first real computers were invented. Then we became tech gods. While we are still at an advantage to most, even those days are past now. Now, we're a curiosity in a world where tech bridges all the gaps and has mostly replaced magic. My name's Ulf Whitlock. I'm one of a small number of people who has inherited the powers of the Cyphers. I'm also a hunter. I track down criminals for the government and that juicy paycheck. I even have my own badge. I take on all types: orcs, elves, goblins. Shoot first, ask questions maybe. That's how Dad did it, it's how his dad did it, and I'm one for tradition. Welcome to the world of cybernetics and the punk, to my world of magic, blood, sweat and steel. Welcome to the Cyphers Edge. I woke after a somewhat restless sleep with the help of my internal alarm. I'd set it so that I wouldn't miss my meeting with Caliban. As I made to switch it off, I realised that wasn't true. It wasn't the sound that was niggling at the edge of my consciousness. There was a voice muttering away, slow words, quiet. My first impulse was to sit up and look around the room. Then I froze as I recognised the voice. Was that Reva? Did she talk in her sleep? It took me a few seconds for my mind to register the weight that was resting on my chest. Opening one eye and glancing down, I took in the figure of a half-dressed half-orc, one arm across my chest, head resting against my arm. Her tank top had ridden up in her sleep, exposing her torso. I could feel her warm body where it pressed up against mine, then the touch of her metal limbs as a contrast, the cool feel of the alloy metals. I hadn't woken in the same bed as a woman in a while, let alone this close. The voice though, it was her thoughts as she slept. I'd forgotten. I could hear her if we were touching. I was surprised I hadn't woken up earlier. I decided to enjoy the moment, stealing a few minutes, enjoying the closeness of another person. If I closed my eyes, I could pretend. The spell was broken after only a minute. Reva stirred, waking slowly, and pulled herself closer in. Then paused as she realised what she was doing. Her eyes opened, suddenly aware. I kept my hands well clear of anything that could get me into trouble. My mouth, on the other hand, didn't get the message. If I'd known you wanted to cuddle. She pushed off me and gave me a kick under the blankets, cutting me off. Ow! I got cold, she said, suddenly defensive. I'm not complaining. She scowled at me. I bet you're not. Ouch, now I felt cold. I could feel that she was trying to be displeased with me, but there was warmth under her emotions. She was trying to hide it. Oh, come on, you're the one who was using me as a hot water bottle. I move around a lot in my sleep. You just happen to be there. You sure know how to make a man feel wanted. I rolled out of bed and pulled on my pants, then turned back to her, a retort on the tip of my tongue. It stayed there. She had pulled the thin blanket up to cover her better, but the material hugged her figure. If anything, it just left more to the imagination. I was too tired to keep my thoughts to myself. My imagination filled in some blanks. Do you mind? I threw up my hands. Oh, come on. It's hard policing my thoughts 24/7 around you. And besides, you look... I trailed off, waving a hand at her, encompassing all that she was. She raised an eyebrow. I look like what? I struggled to find something to say that wouldn't get me into even more trouble. I gave up and reached down to the floor, grabbing my shirt and boots. I pointed an accusing finger at her. You got all close and personal with me. I can't help it if you're enjoyable company. A hint of a smile and a raised eyebrow. Is that what I am? I stumbled over unformed words and gave up. Bloody women, I declared, and walked out of the room, half-dressed. As the door swung shut behind me, I could have sworn I heard her quietly laughing to herself. Okay, so maybe I wasn't as smooth as I would like to be. I got dressed in the hallway and made my way to the common room where Caliban was seated at the bar. He looked well rested, still displaying that casual grace. His clothing was made up of military surplus items, an army green shirt and camo pants, a tactical belt loaded out with pouches, and boots that looked like they'd seen better days. In front of him, spread out on the bar, was a set of maps. He cast an eye over me, not bothering to hide his opinion of my dress code. "You're not planning on wearing that, are you?" Blue jeans and a black long-sleeve shirt. I hadn't really thought about it. Should I not? His eyebrows went up, like I'd just made a comment worthy of a sub-70 IQ score. "Your funeral." I pulled up a stool next to him and sat down. "Are these your maps?" I said, ignoring him and looking over them skeptically. "I was hoping you'd have them digitized." He shook his head. "Sorry, no augments here. Old-fashioned all the way." I pulled one closer and recognized the reference point of the fort we were in. The map spanned a roughly 2-kilometer square area. I glanced at the other maps and I saw that they were made to the same scale. Calivan kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye as I took in the map's finer details. "These are my only copies, so you'll have to scan them." He broke off. "I'm sorry, but you can't go out there in those clothes." "What? Why?" "That swamp is full of things looking for shapes and colors that stand out." He motioned to me. "Exhibit A." I'm afraid I didn't pack camo in a ghillie suit. "That's okay, Jarrow has everything you need." He picked at the fabric of his shirt. "These are dosed with chemicals to mask your smell too. If you step on something's tail, it will still see you, but at least you don't stand out like an orc at a gnome-only club." "Do you get commission or something?" He shrugged. "Oh sure, ignore the only guide in the area with a higher survival rate than fatality. What do I know, I've only been at it 10 years. I mollified him with a promise to upgrade our equipment. We then spent the next 30 minutes going over maps. He pointed out anything of any major significance, then the paths that would take me to the 2 witch covens that he'd thought may be our suspects. He obviously sensed something as he rolled up the maps, tucking them away in his backpack. I had scanned them, luckily, just moments before. The orc from the night before walked into the room, looking the worse for wear. He sat down next to me and waved Jarrow over, ordering 2 of anything he could find for breakfast. "You'll need transport too," Calivan said. "Jarrow has some hovercrafts. They're not the most silent, but it beats the hell out of walking the bulk of the distance." The vampire joined his client at the bar, and I was just negotiating the price of the hovercraft with Jarrow when Reva entered the room. I overheard the orc muttering to Calivan as she walked up to the bar. "It's just not fair. I feel like a truck hit me, and look at her." I lost the last part. His voice dropped away as she passed him. Calivan replied with a chuckle. "You reap what you sow, sunshine." Reva, ignoring both of them, took up a relaxed stance, leaning on the polished timber of the bar beside me. "So, what's the plan?" she asked casually, all signs of our morning greeting gone. I tried to reach out to her feelings. I still wasn't exactly sure how the whole thing worked. I was trying to shield my thoughts from her. That was one thing, but hiding emotions? That was tough. The level of self-control she would need. But she seemed truly relaxed. I could tell that. She was calm. And that was all I was getting. "I was just sorting out our ride," I said. "We can't walk all the way." She scowled. "What's wrong with my bike?" "You won't get very far on that thing," Jarrow said. "It's mostly bayous from here out. Any land is overgrown and some of the plants are as bad as the animals." "So exactly how much are we looking at for this ride then?" I asked. 2K. I'll give you 1K back if you return it in working order." "That's ridiculous," Reva blurted out. He turned from me to her and gave her an ingratiating smile. "Tell you what, you leave that bike here as collateral and I'll waive the 1K deposit." "Now you're really pushing it," she said. I could feel her temper rising. It didn't take much. "Well," he said smoothly, spreading his hands wide, "the way I see it, you have to leave it here anyway. So if you die out there, you won't be needing it anymore." She wasn't pleased with his logic, but he was right. This way it's in my best interest to take care of it, and it's in your best interest to take care of my gear. She ground her teeth and glanced at me. I shrugged. Hey, it's your bike. But he does have a point. "Okay, fine. I'll drop it to 800, and that's cutting my own throat." Reva sighed. She was about to respond when I cut her off. And a set of them fancy clothes Caliban was talking about, for free. He held out his hand. Deal. I shook it. You don't think we'll be coming back, do you? He shrugged. Look, you must be tough to do what you do. But this isn't the city. This isn't gangsters and knives and guns. Best be on your A game out here, mate. Now, anything else? I narrowed my eyes. Got any iced coffees back there? It was an instructive morning. I'd never driven a hovercraft before, and this one was kitted out to be as easy to drive as possible. Jarrow had modified it special for his customers. We had kitted ourselves out with scent-inhibiting camo clothes. It looked like ex-army gear to me. I'd worn this stuff many times, and the memories came flooding back to me as I strapped on the tactical vest and hung my sword from the hook at my waist. Reva was dressed to match. We had a pack each and rations for the day. I didn't intend to get into any trouble today. My plan was just to scope out the two covens and see if we could figure out which one, if either of them, was holding the target. We practically flew over the murky waters of the bayou as we left the fort behind us and took to the mangrove jungle ahead. Birds alighted from immense trees and broken down buildings around us as we sped past. The mangroves were huge, some bigger than the ones Jarrow had built the fort in. The old buildings had mostly crumbled to piles of rubble overtaken by plant life, but those that still stood left an eerie feeling inside me of the sheer magnitude of the magical conflagration that had swept this area. Shops that still had signs over the shattered doors, cars and other detritus that had been abandoned littered the jungle swamp. It was all falling apart or being torn apart by plants, rusted and home to all sorts of critters. I hadn't seen any sign of anything too big yet. We'd seen a tribe of hillbilly goblins. They were shacked up in a ruined collection of industrial sheds that somehow still stood. Other than that, nothing too dangerous. Still, I sat up front with an old 50 cal rifle I had liberated from an army depot a while back. It was a breakdown model, and the reason my bag had been so heavy. I had opted to holster my pistol on my belt instead of inside my leg. Reva had a machete and a shotgun stuck to a magnetic pad on her back. A pair of Desert Eagles that she had purchased from Jarrow rounded off her personal armory. They had definitely seen better days. They hung at her hips, and the full image of her decked out like that made her look like some sort of modern Amazonian warrior. Mohawk streaming out behind her in the breeze as she stood steering the hovercraft, eyes on the water ahead. We had been advised to make the trip to within about a kilometre of our destination and continue on foot, or they'd hear us coming. The problem with that was a kilometre over water was about 2 on foot through the foliage. We weaved through the tight assembly of trees and pulled up on a patch of bank that was level enough to leave the hovercraft on. Reva was looking out over the water as I folded up the tripod and slung the rifle over my shoulder. It was cumbersome, but at least it was a new enough model to be made of some lightweight alloys. Besides, I wasn't about to leave it in this neighbourhood. I felt the spike in her anxiety before she spoke. "What the hell's that?" I turned, instinctively flipping the rifle over my shoulder and sighting down to a patch of water she was pointing at. I caught my breath. Jarrow and Caliban had said the wildlife was something to watch for. I'd been picturing rabid dogs and drop bears come to life. I hadn't expected a row of jagged spines snaking through the water over 10 meters long. The ridge of the back of whatever creature it was looked like tough, mottled leather. It reminded me of crocodile skin, but the colors blended from green into brown in patches. It flowed with grace through the murky water that obscured any view of it from below the ripples. I looked at it through my other sight, and the immensity of the creature was staggering. What could it even be eating to stay that big? The shape in vague ripples of energy filled my view of the water. I was right in my assumption. It looked like a crocodile, but in the same way that a tiger looked like a tabby cat. It didn't slow as it glided through the water, either not noticing us or not caring. "Fuck me, I think we just located the Loch Ness Monster's long-lost cousin," Reva whispered. I could see her out of the corner of my eye, her hands resting on her pistols. "I wouldn't bother with those. I think even Alice here would have trouble sorting out that thing." Reva tore her eyes off the creature as it disappeared into the mangroves. She screwed up her face. "Alice, you named your rifle?" "Yeah." She tilted her head to the side, questioning. Why Alice? I patted the rifle before I swung it back onto my shoulder. Because she's tall, slender, and beautiful. She scowled and turned her back on me. Men. What? She just marched off into the undergrowth. I jogged to catch up to her, falling in behind. We progressed at a good pace considering the mixture of half-destroyed buildings and mutated plant life. Reva was calm again. In fact, she was content. She was enjoying this. So, you got much experience out in nature? I ventured on a hunch as I scanned the trees and ruins around us. When I was young, my tribe used to take me out hunting. Old school with spears and clubs. I was impressed, but not surprised, really. She'd said her tribe was old-fashioned. So, you'll be feeling right at home in all of this then. Do I detect hesitation? She teased. I'm not exactly at home outside of civilization, I replied. There's something peaceful about nature. All the animals and plants live harmoniously. It's only us sentient races that fuck things up. That's bullshit, I said, slapping a mosquito on my cheek. Animals are always killing each other. She sighed. But not just for fun. They only do it to feed. They breed and feed in equal quantities. They have achieved balance. I might not like my family, but there's something to be said for living off the land in a nice small tribe. I grunted. Yeah, well, I'll stick to my cities and takeaway curries, thanks. We trudged a few dozen more meters before she spoke again. You seem to be at home with that gun. You suited up like you could have done it with your eyes closed. She was asking a question with a statement. There wasn't much point in not telling her, not when she was probably picking up the details from my mind. I was a commander in the Navy. Ah, you hung around with a lot of seamen then. Got it. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, like I haven't heard that one before. You're hilarious. A noise in the undergrowth stopped us both dead in our tracks, and I scanned the foliage. Nothing stood out to me. I nodded to Reaver and we continued, slightly more cautiously. Yeah, well anyway, I left after our transport got shot down on a mission. Fucked up my legs, and I decided I wasn't gonna go back in the air anytime soon. I'm not an expert, but isn't the Navy more water-based? I grimaced. I was part of a special ops team. Let's just say we spent more time in places where the enemy was hunkered down than back on the boats. But you just left, just like that. I grunted a reply. Yeah. I could feel her hesitation, but she pushed the point anyway. Must have been a bad crash. I didn't answer. All I could do was try and suppress the memories. The sounds and the images from the past. The screams, the explosions, my squad mates crying out for help just outside my reach. I shook my head. It was, yeah, it was. She didn't reply this time. I wasn't sure if she'd picked up on some of the memories I just had flash through my mind, or if she'd decided not to push her luck. We trekked for a few more minutes until another sound deep in the bushes froze us on the spot. I looked around us, scanning for any signs of life with my other sight. Nothing again. But I definitely heard something. River had heard it too. We stopped at the same time. I squinted at faint bursts of energy far off. Ulf? Yeah. I don't think it's down here. A shiver went up my spine. I tilted my head back and looked up. A pair of yellow eyes stared back at me from between the branches above, unblinking. An elongated, fur-covered muzzle, teeth bared and almost as yellow as the eyes. They were the second thing I noticed. Last of all was, of course, the size. Everything here was on magical roids. Reva and I reacted simultaneously. I reached for the rifle, backing up to give myself space. Reva grabbed her shotgun, and before I knew it, had fired off two big-game lead slugs. The creature, what looked like an oversized carnivorous possum, fell from the branches. Both of Reva's shots missed as it hit the ground. It must have been 3 meters from nose to tail. Tatty fur that looked like it had mange, and it was covered in scars. It was moving too quick for me to get a line on it as it made for Reva. I dropped the rifle and grabbed my sword. The blade extended from the hilt and I dashed in. It closed on Reva too fast and she dropped the shotty, lifting one of her arms and popping a shield. The other hand dropped to her waist and she pulled one of her pistols. It leapt on her. It may have been quick, but so was she. It landed atop her and tumbled her to the ground, claws raking across her vest and a shield jammed in its mouth. She pressed her gun into its ribs and fired 3 rounds in quick succession. I plunged my sword into its back at the same time and it screeched in pain. If anything, I'd just made it more angry. The tail whipped from side to side and caught me across the eyes. I staggered back and pressed my hand against my face. I blinked away blood as I nearly tripped over tree roots in the mud. My sword still stuck in the creature like a pincushion. Reva unloaded the rest of her clip and managed to roll it onto its back. She pulled her arm from its maw and started punching it in the face with as much fury as I'd ever seen from her. It snapped at her between blows and writhed, trying to get out from under her. The bullets hadn't stopped it. The beating it was taking wasn't going to do much either. On pure instinct, I reached out with my senses and felt the magic-imbued circuitry in my sword. "Get off it, now!" I yelled as I activated the internal battery. Reva rolled to one side, dismounting just in time. The killer marsupial went rigid as I opened up the full potential of the Cyphers sword. I could feel power flowing through me into the sword. I wasn't even touching it and somehow I was doubling it. No, I was tripling it. Smoke rose from the fur and blood ran from its ears, mouth and nose. I held the connection, feeling the power coursing through my body like an instant high. I recognized the addictive feeling of magic. I let go of the link and reached out for a tree to steady myself. As I dropped my connection, I suddenly felt empty, hollow. I could feel the urge to reach out and channel the magic again. It was in the ground, it was in the air, raw and powerful. It was calling out to me, just outside my perception, waiting. What had just happened? Was this the potential the garden offered? I looked to Reba. She was panting, looking over her arms for any damage. She patted down her body and found no injury. I wiped the blood from my face. "Motherfucker!" I spat out the mud that had somehow gotten into my mouth. "Your face!" Reva pointed to my eyes. "I'm okay," I said through the stinging pain that was spreading across my face. She got to her feet, ignoring her weapons that lay strewn about her on the ground, and stumbled over to me, reaching up to my face and taking a look at the wound. "That's a lot of bleeding." "It's fine, it'll clot." She shook her head, concern leaking across our link. "There's some wound spray in the packs." She dropped her pack and started digging through it quickly before pulling out a small blue can with a cone-shaped nozzle. I recognized that shit. We used to call it seal and squeal back in the forces. As soon as the thin, pale stream of mist hit my skin, I remembered why. The pain of the wound sealant knitting my flesh back together with unnatural speed coursed across my face. "Ah, fuck!" "Hold still, you sook." Reva grabbed my shoulder as I tried to pull away. She directed the spray with calm efficiency. "Have you ever had to use this crap?" I asked with more anger than was due. She capped the can and started to put her pack back together. "Oh, don't be a little bitch." I flipped her off. She just smirked. "You're welcome." I yanked my sword out of Possumzilla, inspecting it for any damage from the magical surge. It was fine as far as I could tell. "I guess that could have been a hell of a lot worse," I said, cleaning the blade on the matted fur. She picked up her weapons from the mud. "That's an awesome piece of gear you got there," she said, pointing to the sword. "Thanks, it's made specially for Cyphers." "Thanks, it's made specially for Cyphers." "I didn't know you guys had tech like that." I hooked it back on my belt, and without thinking, stroked the wet and dirty tassel that hung from the polished hilt. "It was my father's, specially made." "Your father was a Cypher too?" she asked, genuinely curious. I simply nodded and turned away, not in the mood to take another trip down memory lane today. "Come on, before anything else decides to come and investigate this ruckus." She fell in behind me and we continued to march our way through the swamp, our senses now more attuned to every sound and movement in the undergrowth and canopy above. I checked the vampire's map intermittently, but without a GPS signal to cross-reference and the terrain being as complex as it was, it took longer than it should have to reach the supposed location of the first coven. We readied our weapons as we drew close, just in case. Who knew what kind of things were going to be out there protecting this place? I expected wards, magical booby traps. I was able to sense them to a degree, but it wasn't perfect. Using my other sight, I could pick up the residual energy signatures of latent magic. It wasn't foolproof, and some wards weren't more than a slight glimmer in the air, like a heat wave above metal. We took it slow. I wanted to get in and out nice and quiet. Nothing was showing up though. If anything, that was making me more nervous. Then, just as I smelt the change in the air, Reva spoke up, her voice a whisper. "Smoke?" she asked quizzically. I sniffed the air. It was smoke. Wood fire? She spoke so quiet that she basically just mouthed the words. I shook my head. That wasn't just burning timber. That was metal, rubber, flesh. Oh shit. I pushed through the bushes, my caution abandoned as it became apparent that we were not the first visitors. I took my sword and slashed through the dense weave of vines and saplings. They parted to reveal the truth of the matter. Ahead of us was the remains of a shanty town. Huts up on stakes to elevate them above the waters. Mostly wood but not milled timber, live trees that had been magically forced to grow in tight weaves to make walls. These were mixed with scavenged pieces of sheet metal and old brick and cement buildings. It would have looked a chaotic sight even without the carnage. Holes were scorched through the walls of the small houses, metal warped from heat or force. I could smell the residue of raw magic. It stung my nostrils like alcohol. There were furrows in the mud like a huge plough had decided to rip up the earth at odd angles. What the hell? Reva gasped as she took in the damage. What did this? Magic. Straight up battle magic. I moved in closer to the buildings until I was almost between them. I don't have much experience with magic, she said nervously. You're gonna get it after this trip, I muttered, inspecting the damage to one wall. If magic is this destructive, why don't more people use it? She asked, still shocked by the devastation around us. It takes training, I explained. Years, decades even. And this kind of magic can burn you up if you go too hard too fast. Some C4 and a carbine are less dangerous to the operator, and faster to learn to use. Still, she trailed off. In the silence, as we picked through the wreckage, I thought I could hear breathing or coughing. You hear that? I asked, my voice low. She nodded, then pointed to one of the half-destroyed huts. We crept forward as quietly as possible, not knowing what to expect. If it was one of the residents, they might decide to ignite us first and ask questions later. A door hung from one hinge, blocking the entry to the small hut. I did my best to move it without making too much noise, but halfway through the motion, it fell to the ground. The sound like thunder in the post-war silence. I froze, expecting a spell to be chucked at me at random. Nothing. A groan, another cough from inside. We stepped in, weapons low, but ready. The place was just as I expected from the outside. Broken burning furniture and the reek of magic. And laying under an upturned table, dressed in scorched black robes with long white dreadlocks, was a half-conscious, half-dead witch. I prayed to any god that was listening that I was going to be able to get some answers out of her before she became fully dead. Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. New episodes uploaded every second Saturday. Script and narration by JJ Brandis. Music was provided by Cale McLeish. Copyright JJ Brandis 2025.